now that we've got our three forms set up and we've got the navigation pieces in place, let's go ahead and start with product search, because that'll be kind of the trigger for most of the other functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and just widen this form a little bit, pull up my toolbox and clip it to the side. And I'm going to start with adding just a couple of common controls. I'm going to add a label. And in this label, I want to put in the value of the label. So this is going to say product search, colon, and then we'll add a text box next to that. And this text box will allow us to perform our search. And we'll give this a name. And we'll call it txt product search. And then let's round things out with a button. And we'll align that like so. And we'll call this btn product search. And then we'll change the text value to simply say search. Alright, then the last piece under the data component I want to add is a data grid view. So we'll bring this in and we'll mount it right underneath. And that looks good. We'll leave we'll leave all of we don't need editing or adding or deleting from here. I guess we could potentially do any of these, but we don't want to do them in line. So we'll go ahead and leave them where they are, and then I'm going to resize this like so. And I also want to set the anchoring. So I want to anchor this to the right and the bottom as well. So as we go in and if we resize this form, that it will go along for the ride. Alright, great. So we've got all those pieces in place now. And let's do some of the heavy lifting of doing the search. So we'll double click on search and we get back the btn product search _ click event handler, and the first thing we'll need here is an InventoryUtility, and this will be our InventoryUtil equals, and then I need my dependency DEPENDENC injector, and that will be, what did I call that? Dependency injector utility. Yes. And I need to bring in my using statement for my quickly pos.business library, and I'll say get inventory utility. So that will get me my inventory utility. Now from here I can take and just do some quick validation. So I can say if txt product search.text, let me wrap this inside of a string.is null or white space. So if the text is null or white space, I'll do a message box dot show, then simply say product search value required, and I'll return. So that'll push me out of this event handler. It'll show the message box, and then I'll leave the event handler after. But let's assume this is a good search. Then we will simply say list products, and we'll need to bring in the quickly pos.business.models using statement. So this will be our search results, or inventoryutil.search or inventory search, and then we'll pass in txt product search.text. So that'll actually do the search. And then we need to update our data grid view, which I don't believe we gave a name to. It's just called data grid view 1, so we'll call it DGV products. Let's flip back to our event handler, and then we can say DGV products.data source equals, and I don't remember if we set up a view model for products, so let's jump and look at our view models real fast. We have sales order item view model, so let's go ahead and let's, under product forms, let's add a new folder called view models. And inside of here, let's create a class. So product search view model. And product search view model will simply be a short view model that includes some basic product information. So I'll have a string for name, a string for UPC code, string for description, a decimal for unit price, or maybe that's a float. I'll have to go back and look. And then a date time for last modified. and then inside of it as well, we'll create a constructor. So I'll use the CTOR snippet, double tab, and then we can pass in our product, which will be coming from our business class library. And then we'll say this is just the prod. And then from here, we can say name equals prod dot name semicolon UPC code equals prod dot UPC code. Description is prod dot description. Unit price, which is a float, equals prod dot unit price, which is also a float. And then last modified is prod dot last modified. So that's doing that mapping from our product object into our view model. So now here we can simply let's see, how do we want to do this? We can do a list of product search view model. We'll have to bring in our using statement. And if you don't remember, the way I'm doing that without moving my mouse is control period when I have one of those quick actions, and that pops up the quick action menu for me, and then I just simply hit enter. Alright, so this will be my PS view model collection. And I'll create a new instance of that collection, and then for each, and then I'm going to use the var keyword. Actually, I'll just go ahead and do product, P, and search results. So for each one of those, I want to create a new product view model object. And then add it to the PSVM collection. So here we'll say product search, product search view model. So this will be a PSVM equals new product search view model, passing in P. And let's go ahead and call this a product DTO. I'm going to do a control period and then have the refactoring tools rename that. And then the final step here is we can add that to the collection. So PSVM collection dot add, and then the product search view model object. And then finally we can say PSVM collection and set our data source for the grid view. And as we've experienced before, sometimes it's nice to do the data source equal null first and then set the collection. So that way if we need to reset it and then set it back, that'll give us that functionality. Alright, so we kind of just encoded everything going through that process. So let's go ahead and do start and see if it works. Let's actually just confirm what products we have in our table. So we can search by any of these names or any of these UPC codes. Let's go ahead and start. We'll go to products and search for product, and that brings up our search box. Since it is show dialog, we cannot get back until we either close out of this box. Well, really until we close out of this box, whether hitting the X or if we had some other functionality. So product search, so let's search for, let's just search for ball. Since they're all balls, we should get all of them back. So we ended up with an exception, and it says instance failure, but I'm not really sure what that means. If I click on view details here, see if there is an inner exception. There is not. So what we can do is we can close this here and we can look at the stack trace. So we'll mouse over the exception and then we'll come to this exception property here and we'll click the spyglass, and that'll open up the exception details. So there's a lot of data that's kind of going on in here, but what we're looking at is all of the steps leading up to the exception. So you'll see here there's a lot of system.data.sql client namespace objects that are happening. So there's this TDS parser. But what we're going to do is keep cruising down here until we find something that references the Quickly POS projects. So in here, we have the Quickly POS business data, DB inventory utility, inventory search. So this happened on inside of the DB inventory utility on line 204. So what I'm going to do is close that, hit stop, and then I'm going to jump back to the DB inventory utility, and I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to push Control G, which will bring my go-to. I'm going to go to line 204. So this is the exception line itself. where that exception was thrown. So let's cruise back up here and let's put a breakpoint here on the open line. And then we'll start again. And then we'll go back to products, search for products, and we'll type in ball, and we'll hit search again. Now what will happen is that Visual Studio will break or stop running our code at this breakpoint, so we can start to explore and examine different parts of our code. So we can mouse over here the command, we can mouse over the connection variables and see that they're there. We can even expand this and we can see things like our connection string that's connecting to our database. So that everything here looks good. So let's go ahead and step over using these arrows up here in the toolbar. So we have a step into, which would take us into that function if it was our own. We have a step over, which steps over this line and goes to the next line, or step out, which would step completely out of this function, executing the rest of the code for us. So let's go ahead and do a step over, and that's where we're receiving the exception. So if you notice, we went from open to the exception catch in that next step instead of getting to the reader. That means that when we open the database connection, we're receiving an exception. So if we step over this one more time, we can now mouse over the EX here, and it says instance failure. So that's the same error we received before. There's still no inner exception, but we now know that when a connection is being established, that's when we're getting the error. So instance failure. So I'm not entirely sure what instance failure means, so let's jump out to our good old buddy Google, and we will search for SQL connection open instance failure. And this first article here by Scott Hanselman, who's actually a great resource to follow. He has a lot of stuff. He does a lot of ASP.NET and C# work. So this is an old article back in 07, but let's see what he has to say. So it looks like he's getting instance failure when connecting to SQL Server 2005 Express. So he says he was getting an instance failure when connecting, and he's got his connection strings set up similarly to ours. He says trial and error just taught me the problem was the data source has double slashes, and that's the escape sequence in C#. So we did pull our connection string from our C# code and drop it into our app config. So let's go ahead and jump back here. Let's go ahead and stop debugging, and then we'll open up our app config and see what we've got. Oh, and sure enough, we've got double slashes. We only need a single slash since it's inside of our XML document. So let's save it. Let's try it again. And the operation cannot be completed. The process cannot access the file being used by another process. So something keeps touching my files. And there we go. And we're running. Okay. So product search. Let's try one more time. Ball. And we'll click search. Alright, and there's our connection. So let's step over this again. The connection opened successfully. So I'm going to remove my breakpoint and I'll hit continue, cross my fingers, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so we got back all of our balls. So we have our basketball, our baseball, our football, beach ball, soccer ball, and golf ball. So if I type in golf and click search, I get back just my golf ball. If I type 0123, which is the UPC code of my basketball, I get back my basketball. What if we type orange? We get back orange. What if we type, let's see, red, which I think was part of the baseball. Yep, then we get red and white. So that appears to be working. We can now successfully search for products using our search functionality. Now the next step in doing this is once we've searched, we want to be able to select an item from those search results and then view the details and even do an update. And we'll do that in our next video.